Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to lecture number 2 of the course Object Oriented Programming. In the previous lecture, I have shown you a simple analogy to understand the class and the object. So we have seen in the previous lecture that class is actually a blueprint, for example, car engineering drawing, and an object has something that has some existence, for example, my car or your car. Each object has its attribute, that is variable, and behavior, that is function. So class is something that is on the paper or on the system that describe what is the behavior if any object of that class has been created, right? So the analogy we have seen in the first lecture, we said that there is a car engineering drawing, a very comprehensive drawing or design that shows what are the different functions or the behavior of a car. So if we are going to build a car using that design, we get an actual car, then that car is actually the object of that car engineering drawing class, we can say, right? So that car is an object of car class. So each object, then we have seen that each object in the world has its attribute and behavior, and we can represent these attributes using variable and behavior as a function in a programming language. To perform a task described by a class, an object of that class must be created. So if you describe a C++ class and you won't create an object, you are not going to describe the task performed by that class or the behavior exhibit by that class in your program. So for that you have to create an object of that class. So class definition begins with the keyword class. This is what we have seen in the last lecture, and the class name begins with a capital letter. This is not the compulsory case. This is just the option that increase the readability of the program. So if you have a keyword class with small s, C-L-A-S-S, and then you have to specify after the space the name of the class. That depends upon the user what name he chooses. So it is recommended that you should write the name of the class that begins with a capital letter. A class definition is enclosed in pair of braces. This is what we have seen. This is the same as the definition of the structure. So when you write the definition of the structure, it has the opening bracket and the closing bracket, and then the semicolon. Same thing is followed while writing the definition of the class. There is a keyword class, then you specify the name of the class, and then opening and closing bracket followed by the semicolon. So member function that appears after the access specifier public can be called by other function and member function of that class. So we have seen the two kind of access specifier. The public access specifier means that particular function that appears after the access specifier public. If you remember the example that I have shown you in the last lecture, I will show you here again in the next slide. If you remember that example, there is a word public and then colon, full colon, and then there is a function. This means that function that comes after the public keyword is actually a public function. What does that mean? This means that this function can be called from outside the definition of the class. So you can call any function within the definition of that class. So any function, for example, there is a function 1, function 2, function 3 in a definition of a class, and you can call function 1 from function 2 or function 3, right? By the other function and the member function of that class. By the other function means the functions that are outside the class. So member function that appears after the access specifier public can be called by other function, that the functions that are not the part of the class definition, and the member function of that class and the member function of that class means the function that are inside the class definition. These are the member function of the class. Access specifier are always followed by a colon. Each message sent to an object is a member function call that tells the object to perform a task. So as we have seen that if we want to send some message to the object, what we can do is we can call a function, and this is actually passing some kind of information to the object. So member function can be accessed by object of a class using dot operator. This is what we have seen, that whenever you call a member function, you have to use a dot operator with the object. So there must be an object of that class on the left side, then dot operator, then on the right side of the dot there must be a member function of that class, right? Because calling a function without an object, it doesn't make sense. So if we see the real world, if I'm going to call some function, for example, I want to execute the behavior of a lamp, for example, turning it on, then there must be some lamp present so that I can execute its behavior, turning on behavior that change the state. So member function can be accessed by object of a class using dot operator. So without object, you cannot execute the member function. That means the behavior of the class. So for the behavior of the class, you must have an object. कि आप किस ऑब्जेक्ट का बिहेवियर एग्जीक्यूट कर रहे हैं, किस ऑब्जेक्ट के साथ वो फंक्शन एग्जीक्यूट कर रहे हैं, इसको इस तरह से रिलेट कर सकते हैं. एंड सेकेंड लास्ट जो पॉइंट है, ईच मैसेज सेंड टू एन ऑब्जेक्ट इज अ मेंबर फंक्शन कॉल दैट टेल्स द ऑब्जेक्ट टू परफॉर्म अ टास्क. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इसकी एग्जाम्पल हम इस तरह से ले सकते हैं, वी हैव अ कार. If we want to execute its behavior, for example, pressing the accelerator pedal, we're passing a message basically. Actually, we are saying to the car that go faster. How we can say this to a car? We can pass this information by pressing a accelerator pedal. So this is like you are passing some kind of information to the object by calling its function, right? So each message sent to an object is member function call that tells the object to perform particular task. So this is the class we have seen last time. Here you can see, so class definition start from line number 8 and ends at line number 16, and it starts with the opening curly braces in line number 9 and the closing curly braces at line number 16, and then there is followed by the semicolon. So there is only one function inside the definition of this class. So this is the class is the keyword in line number 8. Class is the keyword. The name of the class, the name of this user defined class is grad book, and there is a one public function inside the definition of that class, and the name of the function, you can easily recognize that this is a function. Display message is the name of the function, and the return type of this function is void. And cout, if you remember from the previous lecture that I told you that cout is used like a printf. You want to display some message on the screen, you can use cout. We will see different usage of cout and cin function. Cin is like a scanf function in C, right? Cin is used to take input from the user. Then this is the end of the function, this is the end of the class definition. Then we have a main function, and within the main function we create an object of gradbook, my gradbook, and then we call a function display message with the object. In line number 22 you can see my gradbook is an object of gradbook class. Then we have a dot operator and display message function. We're calling display message function. Now it will display the message welcome to gradbook on the screen, right? So in today's lecture we will write a simple C++ program using cin cout, right? I will show you how we can write. Let's say enter your name, enter age, we take input different values and display it on the screen, so you can be familiar with cin and cout, how we can use these functions to display something on the screen or to read something from the user, some value from the user. Then we will see the member function with parameters, set functions and get functions in class. So what are the set function actually and what are the get function, and then the constructor. Member function with parameters. Consider the same example, the gradbook example. Now you can see this is the class gradbook. Definition start from line number 9 and ends at line number 18. We have the function display message, right? Now this function has one parameter of type string, right? So the course name is an object of string class, and this is where we include the string class hash include string. So program uses C++ standard string class. Like we have a string.h in C programming language. Similarly, we have a string class. This is not a header file, string class in C++ standard library. We can make an object of string, and we can store any length of string inside that object, right? So it's like a character array, right, in C. I will show you an example with this, right? So with small string, and you write the name of the object. So this is the class, this is the object. You are passing this object, string object, to the display message function, and what is happening inside the display message function is there's a C out. It displays the message, welcome to the gradebook for the course name, the string that you are passing to this function when you call that function. So now in the main, what is happening, you create an object name of the course, a string type object, then you create a my gradebook object whose type is gradebook, and then you display the message, please enter the course name. Then there's a function getLine. So I told you before that cout is used to display something on the screen, and cin is used to read some values from the user. So getLine is basically used to read the string with spaces, because the limitation of, if you remember from the previous course, I've told you that scanf has the limitation that it is not possible to take a multi-word string using scanf function. Same applies here with the cin. You cannot take input using cin, multi-word input using cin, multi-word string input using cin. So for that you use getLine function. You tell from where it has to read and where it has to store, right? Then you call the function mygradebook.display message and name of the course. The name of the course the user enter over here. So यहाँ पर user ने इससे पहले जो भी name enter किया था, input किया था, because getLine, ये जो function है, that is the input function. It read from the standard input and write it over on this string name of course, right? And then you are passing this name of course to the display function by calling this display function method, display message function with mygradebook object, right? So let's go. First we are going to write a very simple program without classes, and then we will write this gradebook program. First we have to include this iostream class. Then you have to write using name space std, I will tell you what is the namespace std, and then there's a main function. We're not going to write the definition, the class. We just write a simple C++ program without class with the syntax of C++, that is cin cout. Let's include the string class as well, so that we can create an object of this string. Okay, so let's display the message. Enter your name, so cin, if you use cin, we were not able to input multi-word string. Let's see what happens. Then cout, enter your age, Then we're going to display cout name is name and age is age. End line is like a slash n, right? We can use slash n over here as well. Now system pause. Okay, let's compile it first. Okay, it compiled successfully. So this string, we are going to create an object whose name is name and that belongs to the class string, right? So this is a very ये काफ़ी हमें एक उसने C++ ने facility provide कर दी. Instead of writing the character array and checking its boundary and all those things stuff, it just provide an object like this. We can create an object like this and store any length of string inside it, right? So let's compile it. Okay, I hope it is visible. Let me write the name Ahmed Ali. So it didn't take the input age. Maybe we need to flush. Let's see. I can flush C in. No. Age is, let's say, 18 and shows the age. Why in the previous execution it didn't ask or prompt for the age? Because we write the name Ahmed and then space Ali, and using simple plain C we are not able to take input a multi-word string. So what we can do is we can use get line function, as we have seen, and we have to, so it read input from C in and write it on this object name. Right? So now you are familiar with the cout, cin, and this is how we can use cout to display the value of different variables. Right? Now let's write the class. That is class, a gradebook class, then we have only the public function in the class. This function is void display message, right? And then we are passing a string object to that class. Okay, then we are going to display cout book is equal to name. So whatever information we pass over here, it display it using cout, and that's it. And in the main, let me comment out all these things. So we create an object my gradebook, and let's pass this my gradebook dot display message, and the message is, so we have to create a variable first of object name bname, so bname dot, you can access the function. Okay, we use the same function get line cin comma bname, then we can pass bname over here, right? So this is, we have a function, member function with a parameter, right? So if we compile it, so expected semicolon over here, let's compile it again, then it is executing. Now we have to write some input because we have this function get line cin bname. So whatever we write on the standard input, that will be written on the name. Let's say name is operating system. Now display the message book operating system, right? This is inside the class here. Okay, now let's look at the book class, a simple book class. So this is the we use the keyword class, and then the name of the class is with capital B, the book. So we have some private data member in the class, and this is the attribute of any book. For example, if you take any book, that book has some name, it has some price, and it has some number of pages. So this is the attribute of that book, right? And attribute, we represent the attribute using the variable, and we make the variable private in the class. I will tell you why it is private and what does private mean. And then we have the public functions. This is function number 1, function number 2. Function number 1 is set name, 2 is set pages, then set price, and then the display function, right? So public means that everything that is public inside the definition of the class, whether it is a member function or a data member of the class, that thing is accessible outside the definition of that class using that class object, right? If something is private within the definition of the class, whether it is a data member or any function in the definition of the class, then that private member will not be accessible outside the definition of the class, right? So you cannot access name, pages, and prices outside the definition of the class, right? You can only access name, pages, and prices within the definition. So definition के अंदर जितने भी हमारे पास फंक्शन आ रहे हैं, उन फंक्शन के थ्रू आप नेम, पेजेस और प्राइस को एक्सेस कर सकते हैं, बट इसके अलावा इस डेफिनेशन से बाहर यू आर नॉट एबल टू एक्सेस these private data member. So that's why we have a private keyword with the that is the meaning of the private keyword. Now why we make the data member private and the function public? I gave you the example in the first lecture about the table lamp. If you remember that example, there are two states of the table lamp, that is on and off, and it has two behavior, that is turning on the lamp and turning off the lamp, right? So if you just observe in every example that I gave you, or if you can just pick up any object, then the state of that object can only be changed by executing that particular behavior of that object. This is a very important point, right? If I want to change the state of the lamp, for example, it is off and I want to change its state from off to on, I have to execute its behavior, that is its functionality, maybe its capability, that is turning on. So when I execute that behavior, the lamp state changes from off to on. I have a radio station, for example, a radio, and whose current volume is 20, let's say, and that is the state of the radio. Any radio set, that what is the current volume? Current volume is, let's say, 20 if it is turned on. If I want to change the volume, I have to execute the behavior, that is increase volume or decrease volume. If I execute the behavior increase volume, it will be increased from 20 to up to, let's say, 25, and if I decrease the volume, it goes from 20 to down to 15. So The point is, for every real world object, you can change the state of that object by executing that particular behavior, right? So to enforce this thing in a object-oriented programming language, we have a access specifier private and public. So we usually make the data members that are the attributes or the field of the class private, and the behavior, that is the function, the public. So behavior or the function in the class are public, while the data member of that class are private. This is because when we create an object of that class or book class, then using that object we are not able to access name, pages or prices, right? We cannot write B. For example, if we create an object of the book like book B1 semicolon, so B1 is the object of book class, we cannot write B1 dot name or B1 dot pages is equal to 175 semicolon. This is wrong, because all the data member of a book class are private. So if we create an object of that class, we cannot access the private data member of that object using in the main function, right? So उस object के private data member को आप access नहीं कर सकते, because the data member are private. How you can access? You can change the value of those data member, or you can get the value of those private data members using the public function that are defined in the definition of the class. Right? I hope now that point is clear, why we have a private and why we have a public. So this also comes from the real world. Class data. The book class, the class book contains 3 data elements: the name, that is character name 15. So the size of the name is 15. We can have a string object over here as well. Integer pages and float price. There can be any number of data member in a class, just as in structure. So in structure definition you can write as many data member as you can. So here is the same case, you can write as many data member as you can, but if you follow pure object oriented programming, you have to keep the data member private. So data member are after the keyword private, so they can be accessed from within the class but not outside. So we had a detailed debate on this, why they are not accessible outside the class and why it should be like this. So with reference to the structure, we can create a structure type variable within the definition of another structure, right? We can make a nesting of the structure. Same is the case here. We can create an object of other class within the definition of one class, right? So किसी भी दूसरी class का object आप किसी भी class की definition में लिख सकते हैं. So like this, we have a structure book. We can write struct book B1. We create an object B1, or we can create a variable B1 whose type is struct book. So we can write B1 dot pages is equal to 355. That is perfectly fine. You can do this. But if we create an object of book class, that is B, if we write B1 dot pages is equal to 355, that is not possible. That is not allowed. Why? Because pages is the private data member of the class. It is not a public data member, right? It is not a public function or public data member. If you make that pages public, if you remove the keyword private, then you can do like this. But it is strongly recommended that you keep the objects, keep the data member of the class private. Then comes the member functions. These member functions are included in the class. There are 4 member functions in a book class, and these are set name, set pages, set price. So there are 3 set functions. Now you remember I told you about that we will see what is a set and get function. So set function is a function that set the value of the private data member of the object of that class, right? So set name will set the name value of the object of that class. Set pages will set the pages value of the object of that class, and set price will set the price value of the object of that class. Then we have a display function. So display function is kind of a get function. So these are the setter. We have a setter function and we have a getter function. So display, what display does is basically it display all the information about that object of the book class on the computer screen. The information includes name of the book, number of pages, and the price, right? So that is kind of a getter function. Usually we have a getter function that returns some value actually, right? For example, get name will return the name of the book, get pages will return the pages of that book, and get price will return the price of the book, right? We will see this thing in depth. So these functions are followed by a keyword public, so they can be accessed outside the class. So public is something that is accessed outside the class, private is something that is accessed only from the definition of the class, right? That is through the member function of that class. Why we make the data member of the class private? Because in a real world you cannot directly access the state of the object. You have to execute the behavior to change the state. So you have to execute the function to change the value or to access the value of the private data member of that object. So class data and member function, access specifier label public and private that we have seen. These are the access specifier, public and private. It defines the access of that particular data or that particular member, whether they are accessible outside the class or not. So functions are public and data is private. This is what we have seen. Why it is so, we already know this, because this concept also comes from the real world. The data should be private and the public function are public. So data is hidden, so it can be saved from accidental manipulation. One of the reason is that you keep the data hide or unaccessed from the outside the definition of the class, and to keep it safe from the accidental manipulation. Accidental manipulation means that if you assign some wrong value to that data, then the integrity of the data will be compromised. So like this. So when you assign the value to the private data member of the object, you call the particular function of the class, and within that function you can validate the input. We will see how we can do this, right? So the function operates on data are public, so they can be accessed from outside the class. Defining objects. So this is how we can define an object. We have an object book B1, and then set name or change name, set price, and set pages or change pages, whatever. So this previously I have written it set name, set pages, and set price, but change name, change pages, change price, these are the same thing, that they are basically the setter function. They set the value of a particular private data member of that object of the class, and b.display will display all those values. So let's see step by step what happens. So when this first line will be executed, book space B1 semicolon, the memory is allocated for that object. It has the three data member, a string, space for the page, and space for the price. Then when the next line is executed, B1 dot change name, so this is actually the set name. So this is set name. So set name function is executed. You are passing the base address of this string, and then you are copying this string in the name. So name is the private data member of some object. Which object? The object by using which you have called this set name function. This set name function, right? So when this function is executed, operating system comes over here. I'm saying it again that instead of change, just assume that this is set name, set pages, set price, right? As we have seen before. Then the third statement is again the function called set pages. So set pages is this function. You are passing a value 500. So 500 is assigned to pages, and pages is the private data member of the object of book class. So we have to check हमें अब यहाँ पर जो पेजेस आप एक्सेस कर रहे हैं इस सेट pages के अंदर function के अंदर. So this set pages function, set name function are inside the definition of the class. I am just showing it here to tell you कि किस तरह से values assign हो रही हैं इसको, right? So p आप जो भी values को pass करेंगे वो p में आ जाएगी, and then you are copying the value of the p into the pages. और pages is the private data member of which object, जिस object के साथ आपने set pages का function main से call किया है उस object के pages, and that is b1. Then on the fourth line there is a function b1 dot change price, right? So and you are passing some value to that function, and this is the function. So 500 value will be assigned over here, and this is the function set price. You're passing 150.56. So 150.56 will be assigned to price, and price is a private data member of the object of class book. So किस class का ये private data member होगा, उस किस object का private data member होगा यहाँ पर, जिस ऑब्जेक्ट के थ्रू आपने सेट प्राइस फंक्शन को कॉल किया है. सो सेट प्राइस फंक्शन यहाँ पर कॉल हुआ है, सेट प्राइस फंक्शन b1 डॉट सेट प्राइस फंक्शन इज कॉल्ड ओवर हियर. सो b1 के जो प्राइवेट डेटा मेंबर हैं दैट आर डायरेक्टली एक्सेसिबल विद इन द डेफिनेशन ऑफ सेट प्राइस फंक्शन. सो नाउ दिस प्राइस विल बी असाइन्ड टू द प्राइस that is a private data member. So as I told you before that whenever you want to call the function of the class, you can call it by using some object. So behavior जब भी execute करना है, real world में देखें behavior जब भी execute करना है object की presence ज़रूरी है. You need some object to execute its behavior to change its state, right? So that same thing applies over here. You need to have an object in order to call the function of the class, right? So object of the same class, with the object of the same class you can execute the function, member function of the same class, right? और जिस object के साथ वो function execute करेंगे उस object के private data member उस function के अंदर directly accessible होंगे. For example आपने set price का function call किया था in the fourth line. So this is set price actually, not the change price. I'm saying it again, change price, this is not a change, this is set. So assume that this is set price, set pages, set name. So set price का function call किया, you pass some value to that function. So the control come to the definition of the class where you define that function, and you pass the value 150.56 to that function. This value will be assigned to the private data member price. Now किस object का private data member, जिस उस object का जिस object के साथ आपने change price का function call किया है. For example, if I create another object b2 and I call the function b2 dot change price 160. Now the price private data member, which is the private data member, if I call this function right, b2 dot change price 160, now 160 will be assigned to the price data member of b2 object, right? So जिस object के साथ function call करेंगे उस object के private data member they are directly accessible within the class, right? So defining an object is similar to defining a variable of any data type. A space is set aside for it in memory. For example, if you declare int x semicolon, this means that 4 bytes of memory will be allocated for the variable x. Same is the case if you create an object of a class like book b1 semicolon, then the memory is allocated for b1 object, right? So defining object in this way, that is book b1 semicolon, means creating them. An object is an instance, that is a specific example of a class. So we have a class, car class, and my car is actually the object of a car class. So my car is a specific example of a car class, you can say, right? So objects are sometimes called instance variable. Now calling member function. The next 4 statement in the main is the calling member function. We have seen these, that is set name, set pages, set price, and display. So whenever a member function is called with the object, then the private data member of that object can be accessed within that member function. So B1 डॉट सेट पेजेस, B1 के प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर सेट पेजेस जो मेंबर फंक्शन है क्लास का उसके अंदर एक्सेसिबल होंगे. ठीक है, दिस इज व्हाट वी हैव ऑब्जर्व. So it do not look like a normal function call because you need to have an object of that class to call the member function of that class, right? This syntax is used to call a member function that is associated with a specific object. It does not make sense to say change name operating system. So you're passing some value operating system to a set name function. Assume that this is a set name function. I'm sorry for this, that there are some function like change name or set name. This is actually the set name. So if I call this function set name without an object के बगैर अगर कॉल करें, so ये जो string है ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम ये किस ये नेम को असाइन कर देगा जो प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर है किस ऑब्जेक्ट का. क्लास के जो आपने क्लास जो लिखी है, if you define a class, it is same as you define the if you define a structure definition, no memory will be allocated until you create a variable of that structure. So if you write the definition of the class, no object will be created until you create, no memory will be allocated for that class until you create an object. When you create an object, then the memory will be allocated for that object. ठीक है, so change name अगर कॉल करेंगे without the object, so it won't assign, and this is a kind of illogical thing, right? That in a real world you can say that okay, I want to execute the behavior, I am executing the behavior of a lamp, turning it on, but there is no lamp actually, there is no object, right? So it doesn't make sense that how can if I say that I execute the behavior of the, I want to execute the behavior of the lamp that is turning it on and there is no lamp, so lamp should be present there, then that behavior will be executed. So the object must be here in order to execute the function of that class, right? The other thing is that the operating system value, it has to assign the operating system string to a name that is a private data member of that class, right? Character array name. Now किस ऑब्जेक्ट के ये जो नेम प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर है उसको ये ऑपरेटिंग सिस्टम असाइन करेगा, बिकॉज वी हैवंट मेंशन ओवर हियर द नेम ऑफ द ऑब्जेक्ट. आई होप यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस थिंग. Because a member function is always called to act on a specific object, not on the class in general. So member function cannot act upon the class. It has to act on some specific object that you specify on the left side of the dot operator, like here. To use the member function, the dot operator, the period connects the object name and the member function. The syntax is similar to the way we refer to the structure member, but the parenthesis signals that we are executing a member function rather than referring to a data item. So वहाँ पर हम जो स्ट्रक्चर के अंदर हमने डाटा लिखा हुआ था, डाटा मेंबर डिफाइन किए हुए थे, उनको डायरेक्टली एक्सेस कर सकते हैं यूजिंग द वेरिएबल नेम ऑफ दैट स्ट्रक्चर, राइट? But here we have to mention the parentheses just to specify that this is a function of a class with the object of the class. The dot operator is also called the class member access operator. Let's go and see the program. Okay, now this is the book class. The private data member are name, pages and price. So these are the setter function, and this is a kind of a get function. You get the information of a particular object on the screen, right? But not in the main function. We can write a separate function, like for example, I can write a function here. Let's say float, that is the return type, get price. Now simply write return price. Return price. So जिस ऑब्जेक्ट के साथ आप गेट प्राइस का फंक्शन कॉल करेंगे, उस ऑब्जेक्ट का जो प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर है प्राइस, उसकी वैल्यू ये फंक्शन रिटर्न कर देगा, राइट. सो दैट इज द एक्चुअली द गेटर फंक्शन. ओके, so now we create an object. So we call the functions, let's say set name, set pages and set price, and then we call a function, let's say cout, and price is equal to b1 dot get, okay, b1 dot, you have to compile it so that the get price and line. Okay, now let's compile it. Okay, now in the class, in the book class, we have 3 private data member, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 functions. So we are calling first the setter function to set the value of b1 object's private data member, and then we call the display function to display these values, and then we call get price function to get the price of that b1 objects price प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर, जो प्राइस जो प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर है b1 ऑब्जेक्ट का, उसकी वैल्यू गेट करने के लिए वी हैव दिस फंक्शन. सो यू कैन क्रिएट गेट नेम फंक्शन, गेट pages function as well, right? So let's execute it. Okay, now you can see the first thing, it display name is equal to operating system, pages is equal to 500, price is equal to 150. So you set first these values, then you call the display function that display this information, right? And then we call get price function. So price is equal to 150.56, right? So it display that thing. So if we just comment out this thing, compile and execute it again, it just shows what is inside the display function. That's it, right? So the getter and the setter function are basically those functions that are used to set and get the private data member value of a particular object respectively. So setter function are used to set the value of private data member of that object, जिसके साथ आप setter का function call करेंगे, and getter function are used to get the value of that private data member of that object, of which object, जिसके साथ आप get का function call करेंगे, right? So let me create another name variable object b2, and then let's write b2 dot set name, let's say programming b2 dot set pages, let's say pages are 790, and b2 dot set price, that is 1000.75, right? So what I am doing here is I just remove the display. Now b1 जो ऑब्जेक्ट है उसकी प्राइस क्या है, इट विल डिस्प्ले बाय दिस लाइन, एंड सेम b2 ऑब्जेक्ट जो है उसकी प्राइस क्या है, we can call the same function using b2 as well, b2 dot get price. So अब b2 की प्राइस हमें पता चल जाएगी, and this it display is, the display will be 150.56 and 1075, right? So b1 dot get price, b2 dot get price. Let's compile it and execute it. So B1 price is 150.75 and B2 price is 1075, right? So you can display like this. B2 dot display. Now it shows you the name of the first book, operating system, pages 500, price 175.56. The second object, the value of the private data member of second object, that is P2, name is equal to programming, pages is equal to 719, price 1075, right? So each object has its own attribute. It has nothing to do with the attributes of the other object, right? Okay, let's go to the slide. Data member set and get function. Now you have the idea of getter and setter function. So this is our grad book class. Another example. So we have a function set course name. Now this function, what you're passing the object of type string to that function, right? And what is the string? String class is provided by the standard C++ library. And then you are assigning this string value to the course name. And what is the course name? Course name is actually the private data member of this class whose type is string. So this is you can write the private data member over here after the public, or you can write it before the public. It doesn't matter, right? So in the previous example, we have all the private data member before the public. So private data member is class में एक लिया, that is एक object है whose type is string, the name of the object is course name. So with set function you are assigning the value to the private data member of the grad book object. And there is another function get course name. Get course name will return the course name. So this function returns the object of string type, and it returns actually the value of course name object. Display function will display it on the screen, right? So getter function and setter function are basically, setter function are used to set the value of the private data member of the object of that class, and getter function are the function that return the value of the private data member of the object of the class. Let's see the example program. Another example program, the distance class, that has some data members and the member functions. The data members are feet and inches, and the member functions are set dest, get dest, initialize, and show dest. So you can see the set dest function. You're passing two values to that function, feet and inches, and what this function will do, this function will initialize the private data member of the object with which you are calling set dest function with feet and inches. So आप कॉल करेंगे लेट्स से d1 डॉट सेट डेस्ट और ब्रैकेट के अंदर कुछ उसको दो वैल्यूज पास कर देंगे फ्रॉम द मेन फंक्शन और एनी अदर फंक्शन आउटसाइड द डेफिनेशन ऑफ द क्लास, एंड देन what will happen is whatever value you are passing to that function, it will assign this value to the private data member of the object of that class. Get dest will return, get dest basically get the value from the user. So it's not necessary if the name is get or set, it will you can write any name to that function. I can write here, let's say ABC, the name of the function, right? But if the name is meaningful, it will be easy for you and for the other programmers to see the function and visualize what this function will do. So get dest function is basically used to get the information at runtime from the user at the execution time. Initialize function will initialize the private data member of that object, and show dest function will show the value of the private data member of the object of distance class, right? Let's go to the distance class. So this is the distance class. It has two private data member, feet and inches, and this is the public area, public function of that class. Show set dest function, what it do is it assign the value you pass to that function to the private data member of the class, feet and inches. सो किस ऑब्जेक्ट के प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर को ये साइन होंगे? जिस ऑब्जेक्ट के साथ आप सेट डेस्ट का फंक्शन कॉल करेंगे। सो जिस ऑब्जेक्ट के साथ क्लास का मेंबर फंक्शन कॉल होगा, उस क्लास के प्राइवेट डाटा मेंबर को उस मेंबर फंक्शन के अंदर एक्सेस किया जा सकता है, लाइक दिस। अगर ये D2 के साथ कॉल होगा तो फीट और इंचेस D2 के होंगे। अगर ये D1 के साथ सेट डेस्ट कॉल करेंगे तो फीट और इंचेस D1 के होंगे, बेसिकली ऑब्जेक्ट के होंगे। Get dest function, same is the case with the get dest function, that is used to take input value from the user during the execution of the program. Initialize will initialize the feet and inches with 0 and 0, right? And show dest function will show the value of distance object, that is feet and inches, right? So this is the variable, this is a variable private data member of the object with which you are calling show dest function, right? So here in the main function we create two objects with first object dest1 dot set dest. We call a function set dest and pass it two values. The first value is integer, the second value is the floating point value. And then with object 2, that is dest2, we call the get dest function that initialize the private data member of dest2 by the values input by the user. And then we have cout dest1. Now we are calling here show dest function with dest1 and show dest function with dest2. In the first call of the show dest with object dest1, it will show the value of feet and inches of dest1 object. In the second call, it will show the value of feet and inches of dest2, and then it ends, right? So that is again a very simple program. Let's compile. So now where is that prompt actually in the program? If you see in the program, it first creates the two objects, then it calls this function, and this function is called control come over here. It passed the first value, second value, and that is assigned to the private data member of the dest1 object. Then you call a dest2 object, then you call get dest function with dest2 object. Now in the get dest function, it display the message cout enter feet, and then it wait for the input from the user. So here what is doing, it is waiting for the, it is prompting for the input. So let's say feet is 5. Now the next thing is enter inches, see in inches. So here you can see if I enter, let's say 7.8 inches, now it display me the value. The value of dest1 is 11 and 6.25. This is we have assigned over here. dest1 object की value, private data member की value क्या 11 and 6.25, okay, and the value of dest2 private data member is 5 and 7.8, right? That we assign over here. Distance class data member initialization. So distance class shows two ways to initialize the data member in an object. Data member of an object, this is void initialize. Void initialize, what it do is it initialize the private data member of the class with value 0. For example, if I go to the previous slide and open the same program, and now if I call dest1 dot initialize like this, I assign the value 11 and 6.25 to the private data member of dest1, and then after calling, and then here afterwards I call the initialize function with dest1. Now what will happen, the initialize will initialize or assign 0 to both the private data member of dest1 object, and if you display here using a show dest function, here using a show dest function, it will display 0 and 0. Let's compile and execute it. You see, so dest1 के पहले उसने value send कर दी थी 11 and 6.25. Then you call the initialize function. Now it initialize the value of dest1 private data member, and now they are 0, 0. So these are the two methods by using which we can initialize the initialize or change the value of the private data member of distance object. This is initialize and set dest function. So can object be initialized whenever it is created without requiring a separate call to a member function? So this requires that you have to explicitly call the initialize and set dest function. You have to write ddest1 dot set dest if you want to initialize its value, or you can write, you have to write dest1 dot initialize, right? So you have to call these functions in order to initialize the value of the private data member of the object of distance class. But can an object be initialized whenever they are created without requiring the separate call to the member function? Yes, it is possible. So this is called the automatic initialization, is carried out using a special member function called a constructor. So we will end over here. From the next class we will start with the constructor. Let me summarize our today's lecture. In today's lecture we have seen the access specifier, private and public. We have seen some examples, that is grad book example, a book class example, distance class example, and yes, these three examples. And in the next lecture we will see what is a constructor, why we need a constructor, what is the function of the constructor, and we will see some of the examples.